taking a look at the cover crop sorghum field that we ended up with. Buckwheat that we tried to plant didn't do very well. So let's roll over the sorghum and see what it does. Here, after the initial rollover, it appears as though it's going to do a fine job of providing enough cover for plot. But as you can see, 4 days later, once it starts to dry, most of the ground coverage has disappeared. There's a lot of soil that's barren, which also means that there's seed that's barren and easily picked by birds and other wildlife, and also dried out by the sun. Um, this also causes soil erosion, wind erosion, and has detrimental effects on your food plot. You want to aim to get a lot more coverage than what we got here. We went ahead and planted it, and put out isolation cages, as you just saw, to monitor the progress of the plot throughout the coming weeks and months. Um, I'm going to pause a second so I can go back and talk about the isolation cages. Explain what the importance of those are. Okay, here we are looking at an isolation cage and area that doesn't have an isolation cage. What's meant by these terms is that you got to separate an area that the deer can't have access to truly be able to decipher if your plot has the ability to grow what it is that you're planting. Um, the cage needs to be high enough or narrow enough that a deer can't get inside of it to eat it, and it also has to be durable enough that they won't knock it over during hard times. So I chose to build mine out of chicken wire and tomato stakes, and I keep them small enough in diameter that a deer can't jump over it, land within the perimeters of it, and begin eating what it is that I'm trying to isolate. So you just got to keep that in mind. Make sure that you keep the dimensions such that deer can't have access to it, which is the whole purpose of the isolation cage. And I'll show you later in the video um, the results that are very evident on this food plot by looking at the isolation cages that we put in. Now back to the food plot, and this is 6 days after the initial planting, and the problem just got a little worse as the sorghum continued to dry. Um, there's even more exposed soil at this point, um, and we will have to wait and see. But uh, 4 days later, we went out to look at it, which is 10 days after planting, and we did have clusters of growth and some sporadic growth throughout, um, but not nearly the coverage that we anticipated, which once again goes back to the fact of having too much exposed soil. And a lot of the seeds just were no longer viable or were consumed by wildlife in the area. Um, but we'll look around here. We do have a variety of species coming up. You got some brassicas, some turnips, a little bit of rape coming through. Um, and we do have some areas that we've missed with our spraying. But then 6 days after that, as you can see, the areas that were able to germinate and survive the lack of coverage are beginning to grow pretty well. This is 6 days, or my bad, this is 16 days after the initial planting, which we would like to see a little bit more consistent growth, a little bit fuller field, but we can't expect to have those results with the lack of coverage that we had, while employing the no-till method. The coverage isn't necessary if you do till the earth, but then you are introducing other problems by doing so. So as we move forward, we're going to be looking at uh, the plot after 30 days of growth. As you can see, all the bright green is developing turnips or developing brassicas. Very little growth on the bottom half of the plot, but on the top half there, where we planted our brassicas for the wintertime, plenty of growth. This is the bottom half where none of the grains came in. It's just all driller daikon radishes that we put in on the bottom here. I think the birds ate all the grain seed, and what wasn't ate dried out. We had little to no germination of any of our grains. This is all brassicas. But we learned something along with this year. You got to take the good and the bad out of every method that you employ on your whitetail property, and learn from it. For each following year, you don't repeat the same mistakes. So hopefully, by sharing this, I'm able to help others through the same problems. So this is the plot. Here's 40 days after the initial planting, about a month and a half, right before we decided that we better throw some winter rye on the plot to try to fill in all the empty spots. So we're going to hope to recover this plot, plant 200 to 300 pounds of winter rye over the top of all of it, and hope we can come up with a solid green food plot for the deer to use in mid to late season, because we don't anticipate having much early movement from the bucks in the area or the doe due to agriculture and horses. Okay, now here's the images that I told you I was going to show you of the isolation cages, showing the immaculate amount of growth within the cages, but around the cages is not even a quarter, especially not a half, but probably not even a quarter of the growth of what's shown inside the cages just from deer browse. This is how important they are to give you a true understanding of whether or not your plot is able to grow the forage that is needed to sustain a healthy deer herd. So, like I said, these are the images, and thanks for watching.